Israel has reportedly informed the United States that Iran is planning to assassinate President Trump. Let's take a closer look at this today. According to a report by the Wall Street Journal, Israel confirmed intelligence related to Iran's plot to assassinate US President Donald Trump and then passed this information on to the US government. According to the report, Israeli government officials detected signs that a new assassination plot targeting President Trump was being planned inside Iran, and it is said that they immediately shared this information with the US side. The Wall Street Journal noted that if this intelligence is accurate, the US-Iran confrontation could become much more serious. The emergence of intelligence directly targeting the US president amid ongoing military tensions between the two countries is seen as highly sensitive. Of course, this isn't the first time Iran has tried to assassinate President Trump. Previously, during President Trump's first administration, Iran had repeatedly warned of retaliation for the death of Qasem Soleimani, a commander of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard who was killed in a US operation. However, the specific details of this intelligence or how the information was obtained have not been disclosed. The Wall Street Journal also did not reveal the identity of the source or how the intelligence was obtained. The Israeli embassy in Washington, D.C. did not respond to related questions, and the Iranian mission to the United Nations also did not provide any comments, so there has been no official response to this report. As all the parties involved are remaining silent, interest in the credibility of this intelligence and the actual level of risk is growing even more. It's not exactly clear if this is related, but it's been reported that after the NATO summit, President Trump switched to Air Force One when returning to the United States. According to The Guardian and other sources, after finishing the NATO summit, President Trump boarded the older model of Air Force One in Ankara, Turkey, at around 8:43 p.m. to return to the United States. When asked at a press conference if he used the older Air Force One due to threats from Iran, President Trump said a president's life is always at risk, which is why this issue arises. He also stated he is Iran's top assassination target. Afterwards, President Trump explained through Truth Social that he would take the old Air Force One from Turkey to Mildenhall for the sake of tradition, and although it is a short distance, he said it is a worthwhile journey to give military heroes the opportunity to see the new aircraft. Then, after arriving at the Mildenhall Air Force Base in the UK at 10:16 p.m., he boarded the new Air Force One that was waiting for him. Some are speculating that the US government intelligence agencies may have detected Iran's movements in advance. In particular, as it became known that President Trump used a different aircraft than usual during his travels, some interpreted this as a measure to strengthen security. The US government did not officially acknowledge these speculations or give detailed explanations about Air Force One's operation. However, since frequently changing the president's travel routes and aircraft is a commonly used security procedure, there are various interpretations regarding this recent measure. Of course, there are also quite a few opposing opinions about this. The main reason is that the source of this intelligence is Israel. Some people have raised suspicions that Israel may have deliberately exaggerated the threat in order to block the possibility of improved relations between the United States and Iran. Israel has long defined Iran as its greatest adversary threatening its national security, and there is also analysis that Israel has an interest in the United States maintaining a hardline stance against Iran. Because of this background, there is a view that this intelligence may also be politically motivated intelligence, and especially the timing of this news has led to various interpretations. The United States and Iran have kept up major airstrikes and tensions after the ceasefire, but there are also signs of renewed diplomatic efforts. Many have observed that intelligence about an assassination plot against President Trump was disclosed just as Ali Khamenei's funeral ended, and talks of renewed negotiations between the countries were expected. If the US government takes this intelligence as a serious threat, there's a possibility that the atmosphere for negotiations could quickly cool down. Of course, so far, no objective evidence to support this has been made public. In fact, whether the intelligence is true or how credible the government is has not been confirmed, and the countries involved have not provided any detailed explanations. For this reason, in the international community, there are both views that this report should be seen as a real security threat and that it could be part of an information campaign shaped by diplomatic calculations. Meanwhile, Israel appears to be preparing to attack Iran. Israeli Defense Minister Katz said in a speech at the Air Force pilot graduation ceremony on July 9 that Israel is maintaining the highest level of alert so that it can resume military operations against Iran at any time. He stressed that the Air Force has shown it can operate in Iranian airspace and is ready to respond quickly if Iran's military threat rises again. He sent a clear message to Iran, saying they would not hesitate to launch a third unilateral airstrike if needed. This remark is being interpreted as evidence that Israel is not easing military tensions, even though a ceasefire is currently in effect. Prime Minister Netanyahu shared a similar view, noting that Iran and its allied armed groups have been greatly weakened by 2 prior military operations. However, he cautioned it's too soon to say the conflict is over. He went on to suggest that if Iran is found to be rebuilding its military power or expanding its nuclear development and missile capabilities, Israel could take action again. These consecutive statements have led the international community to believe that despite the current ceasefire, Israel is still conducting intelligence gathering and preparing for its next military operation. Of course, separately from that, anger toward the United States is growing quite a bit within Iran right now. At Ali Khamenei's funeral, what stood out was not general hostility toward the US and Israel so much as the non-stop chants directly targeting President Trump. The crowd gathered at the scene repeatedly shouted slogans like "Trump must die," "Assassinate Trump," and "Take revenge." These scenes quickly spread through various on-site videos and foreign news reports. Some may see these as emotionally charged remarks shouted by a few participants, but the fact that the same slogans were repeatedly heard throughout the event is seen as an indication of the current direction of public opinion within Iran. In a situation where many citizens hold the United States responsible for the supreme leader's death, we are seeing their anger focused on President Trump. In particular, every time the speeches continued, the crowd reacted strongly to President Trump's name, responding with applause and cheers. This suggests that, beyond resentment toward the United States, there is a growing sentiment of viewing President Trump as a symbolic target for retaliation. Of course, these slogans do not necessarily represent the official policy or actual action plans of the Iranian government. However, it is also not easy for the political leadership to completely ignore this public sentiment. Since hardline groups, including the Revolutionary Guard, continue to call for a tough response against the United States, the new leadership now faces the difficult situation of having to consider both domestic public opinion and the views of the international community at the same time. The open expression of hostility toward President Trump during the funeral is being analyzed as a factor that could further destabilize future US-Iran relations, regardless of whether it leads to action. In this situation, the biggest variable is the scheduled negotiations between the United States and Iran. Both sides are scheduled to resume negotiations on July 11, but the atmosphere surrounding the talks has changed significantly compared to just a few days ago. First, reports that Israel provided intelligence to the United States about an assassination plot against President Trump are raising the possibility that voices within the US calling for greater caution against Iran will grow louder. Meanwhile, Israel has said it is ready to launch more military operations against Iran if needed, raising pressure. Inside Iran, the supreme leader's funeral has seen ongoing strong anti-US and anti-Trump slogans, further intensifying tensions between the two countries. Negotiations can only be expected to make progress if there is a certain level of trust in the other party, but currently suspicion toward each other is only growing. If the US trusts this intelligence, it will likely make stronger demands in negotiations or stay on high alert. If Iran thinks the US and Israel are raising tensions to pressure them, it likely won't concede easily in talks. Negotiations haven't begun, yet military tensions and political pressure are rising simultaneously outside the talks. They have already exchanged missiles and drones, so if this atmosphere continues, there are predictions that the upcoming negotiations may end up only reaffirming their differences rather than achieving any real results. And there's still one more variable left. Even if the negotiations proceed as scheduled, it doesn't necessarily mean an agreement will be reached. The United States will likely insist on strict limits on Iran's nuclear program and military activities, while Iran refuses to yield unless there is significant progress on sanctions relief and frozen assets. In this situation, with the addition of assassination intelligence and rising military tensions, there is a possibility that both negotiating teams will enter the talks with a much stronger stance than before. There are also concerns that even a small clash or unexpected incident could halt the negotiations or lead back to a military standoff.